Hello, today we're talking about the derivatives of the trigonometric functions. Now we've already talked about the basic derivatives. We already know the derivative of sine of x, and we already know the derivative of cosine of x. And using that information, we're going to figure out what the derivatives are for the rest of the trig functions. So let's just start by writing down our derivatives that we know. So starting on number 1, we have y sine of x. So y prime is going to be the derivative of sine, which is cosine of x. And I also have y equals cosine of x, and that derivative is y prime is equal to negative sine of x. So we're going to use that information to find the derivative of tangent, the derivative of secant, the derivative of cotangent, and cosecant. So let's go ahead and we are going to do tangent together, and you'll do some of these on your own. First thing that I need to do is rewrite tangent. And I want to rewrite tangent in terms of sine and cosine. So tangent is sine of x over cosine of x. And when you look at that, we have a special rule that we need to use, and that is the quotient rule. So we have a quotient. We have to use the quotient rule unless I rewrite it to make it a product. I'm going to leave it just like this. So let's go ahead and do our derivative. So I'm going to take the bottom, which is cosine of x, times the derivative of the top. The derivative of sine of x is cosine of x minus the top times the derivative of the bottom. And the derivative of cosine is negative sine of x. And that is all over the bottom squared, which is cosine of x squared. So that's just by using my quotient rule. This is what I end up with. Now, I'm going to go ahead and simplify what I can simplify to try and figure out, well, what's the derivative of tangent? Because this is not very helpful. When I simplify this, I have a cosine x times cosine x, which is cosine squared x. Additionally, I have a negative sine of x times a negative sine of x, and negative times a negative actually gives me a positive, and sine of x times sine of x gives me sine squared of x. This is all still divided by cosine squared of x. So I look at that top, and I should recognize that as something. Sine squared plus cosine squared equals, or cosine squared plus sine squared equals, if you don't remember, we need to, I'm going to write it over here, sine squared x plus cosine squared x is always equal to 1. Back to our unit circle. So I'm going to replace the cosine squared x plus sine squared x with a 1. So this will be equal to 1 over cosine squared x, which is 1 over cosine of x, and that whole thing squared. And 1 over cosine x is a trig function that I should know, and 1 over cosine of x is secant of x. So the derivative of tangent of x is secant of x squared, or, writing it the lazy mathematician way, secant squared x. So let's move on to number 4. We are now going to find the derivative of secant of x. So the first thing I want to do is rewrite it in terms of sine and cosine. So I'm going to have y is equal to 1 over cosine of x. So at this point I need to make a decision about how I want to find this derivative. Do I want to leave it as is, which means I would be using the quotient rule, or do I want to rewrite so that I'm using a power rule with a chain rule inside? And I could do whichever way I want. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite it as cosine of x raised to the negative first power. And I'm going to work this derivative this way. So when I take my derivative, I'm going to have, I bring my exponent down. Now I'm just using a power rule. Sorry, let's write that down. We have a power rule with a chain rule. Now, you don't need to write this down. I'm just writing it down as a little reminder for us. So bring my exponent down. I have cosine of x is now raised to the exponent it was minus 1, which would be negative 2. Now I need to multiply by the derivative of the inside. The inside is cosine, and the derivative of cosine is negative sine of x. At this point, all I really need to do is do some simplification. So, working on our simplification, I have a negative 1 and I have a negative sign, so that's going to make it positive. I have a sine of x is going to be on top, and I have a cosine squared of x is going to be on the bottom. So I'm going to rewrite that. I have a cosine of x on the bottom, and I have a sine of x on the top, and I have another cosine of x on the bottom. And the reason I rewrote it this way is I have two different trig functions here that I recognize. But it is the same. I have a cosine x times cosine x in the denominator, which is cosine squared x. I just put one on top of one of the cosines and sine of x on top of the other one. And now I know 1 over cosine. This is the same as secant of x. And then I have sine of x over cosine of x is tangent of x. And there we have our derivative of secant x is secant x tangent x. The reason we're going through this is you need to memorize these, but if you can't memorize them, then you know how to get to the answer anyway. I don't have to memorize. It's going to take me a lot longer if I don't memorize, but I have the ability to find these derivatives if I need to. So cotangent of x. I would like you to try cotangent of x by rewriting in terms of sine of x and cosine of x, and then using a quotient rule to determine that derivative. So go ahead and pause the video now to work out that derivative. So here I have worked out the derivative of cotangent x. Now, if you didn't get it, don't just stop the video and write it all down. Try and figure out what it is you didn't get or where you went wrong. Find your mistake. It's not about reproducing what I've written onto your paper. It's about understanding what I've done so that you can do it as well. So if you need to pause the video to look at that problem, please pause the video now. If you are good to go, then we have one left, and that is cosecant. And what I'd like to do with cosecant is I want to rewrite it. So the first thing I'm going to do is rewrite cosecant as 1 over sine of x. And this time what I'd like to do is leave it as is and treat it as a quotient rule. So if you would please leave it as a quotient rule and go ahead and find the derivative of cosecant of x. So go ahead and do that. Pause the video now. So for my derivative of cosecant x, I got negative cosecant x cotangent x. And again, if you didn't get that, press pause now and figure out what went wrong. At this point, you do need to try and memorize these. There are commonalities. The cotangent and cosecant, those derivatives are both negative. The cosecant and the secant, those derivatives start with that same term and then add their version of tangent to it. And the cotangent and tangent are both squareds. So somehow you need to memorize what all of these derivatives are. So please try and do so before we have class, and I will see you in class to work on more trig derivatives. Have a nice evening.